Things Fall Apart is one of the books that gave me what I like to call literary permission. It gave me permission to write my own stories. My favorite of Achebe's novel is Arrow of God, I should say, which I think is his great. But Things Fall Apart is obviously the best known. When I first read Chinua Achebe's work, Things Fall Apart, Arrow of God, and the Man of the People and the ones that were not colonial Igbo land. It was very eye-opening for me because I grew up reading books, as many of us did, that did not reflect our reality. And even if we were mentioned, it was often in a way that was not very complimentary. And so Things Fall Apart is one of the books that gave me permission. I think it's also a novel that really, it changed the world because it forced a change in how we were seen by outsiders. It forced outsiders, I think, to acknowledge what somehow they continue to blindly insist on being blind about, which is our humanity.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Adelowa. Well, I would like to recall that of all the writers, even those that came before you, you were the only one that Chinua Achebe singled out for a very high praise. You know, he said Chimamanda is a writer with the gift of ancient storytellers, and she came almost fully made. And everywhere we go, we recall
Chelunu ka kwa ka chelunu kwa na aka biko no
and the Chinua Achebe we know, you know, is not given to that, you know, such expressions. But, you know, now looking at what Chinua Achebe said and your career trajectory, you know, since the publication of Half of a Yellow Sun, you know, it is very clear that he was very prophetic. And that makes me wonder, when you look at Chinua Achebe's career and yours, are there meeting points? Are there agreements? The trajectory of your careers? Do you find yourself obsessed by the same curiosities, the same anxieties, the same impulse that must have driven Chinua into taking on all the challenges he took during his time?
No, well, first of all, I think that as a creative person, what one wants more than anything else is a feeling of uniqueness, right? So I think that, and also in general, I don't really spend my time wondering how I'm similar to other writers or not. But I do think that, look, Achebe was a great man. Achebe personified greatness in his work and as a human being. And I also don't like to do a lot of self-analysis, but this was my hope. My hope is that, you know, the way that he lived his life with integrity, he told his stories truthfully, and he had a deep, abiding love for his people and from where he came from. And I find that deeply moving and admirable. I think if anything both of us were supposed to become doctors and we fled medicine. So that is one similarity.
Okay. The next question, I'm afraid I'll have to take a direct quote from Chinua Achebe himself, where he talked about the balance of stories. He said, and this is really what I personally wish this century to see, a balance of stories where every people will be able to contribute to a definition of themselves, where we are not victims of that people's accounts, And I wonder, would you say that this has come to pass in our own time? Do we have anything that comes close to a balance of stories?
It has changed. We're not quite there yet. We still have a little way to go. But I think that in terms of storytelling and in terms of the stories told about Africans, more Africans are telling African stories. And of course, that's a good thing. But I think there's still a bit of a ways to go. You know, I remember when I first, so with Purple Hibiscus, the first novel that I wrote, and I was trying to get a publisher in the US, and I started sending the manuscript out, and I got many, many rejections. I think it's important for the young people here to hear that story, that if you want to become something and you want to do something with your life, just because you get rejected is not a reason to stop. You keep pushing, you keep going, you keep trying. I got 25 rejections. Yes, and I counted, and I still have them as evidence in my drawer. I was sending out the manuscript, and I was getting these rejections back. And I remember that many of them said, "We cannot sell you because you're not like anybody else." And the publishing industry really likes the idea of saying, this new writer is like somebody else who's already known and published. And so at the time, there was really no contemporary African who was writing contemporary stories and was published or well known in the US. The last writer that they knew of who was well known was Chinua Achebe. But Chinua Achebe's stories were about pre-colonial Africa. I was writing about contemporary small-town Nigeria. I had thrown in Igbo words in the story. I had made no attempts to simplify things for people to understand easily. So I got up many of these rejections, but I kept trying. I kept trying because I believe in trying. And so I want to say to the young people here, keep trying because you never know. Before you give up, make sure that you have put in more than 7,000%. Before you give up. Before you give up, you need to keep pushing. So imagine what it's like. You go every day, and this was before email was common. This was in 2001, 2002. And when you sent out your manuscript, you would include the self-addressed envelope so that they could send their response back to you. So that in other words, they didn't have to waste their money if they wanted to say no to you. So imagine what it was like for me. I was a student at the time. And every day I'll come back from school, I'll go to the mailbox, my heart pounding. And then I would see an envelope in my own handwriting. So I knew that it came from an agent or a publisher that I had sent my manuscript to. And I'd open it, my hands shaking, hoping for good news. And it was bad news over and over again, 25 times. So I don't want to hear any complaining from young people saying, I tried something 2 times, I did not succeed. You have to keep trying. You have to keep trying. And so one day, finally, it was good news. And I will tell you what the woman wrote. First, she said, I like your writing. The story is interesting. But nobody knows Nigeria. Nobody's going to buy a book about what you're writing about. You're not like anybody else writing, but I will take a chance on you. And that's how my publishing journey began. My first book was published by a small publishing house that didn't have much of a budget, but they believed in the story. And the book was published. I was told not to have high expectations because the Purple Hibiscus is set in Nsukka and Enugu. It's not even Lagos that some Americans have at least heard about. But the book became an independent bestseller with very little publicity because the bookshops, what happened was that the independent bookshops was hand selling the book. So the bookshop owners had read it. So if people came into their bookshop, they would say to them, read this book. It's different, but read it. And that's how it became an independent bestseller. And that's also what made other publishers then become interested in publishing the next thing that I wrote. And so for me, it is important, especially for us in this country, especially for you young people. I know many of you here are talented. Many of you here have dreams. Some of you have put your dreams in your pockets because you think there's no point. Bring it out of your pocket and try. And so I will tell you the title of my novel, and I will modify it for you. Don't ever forget that your dreams count. Your dreams count. Modify.
Wow. Odelu wava. If we get to when nyala bataza in a dream count. Okay, now let's talk about dream count. To my mind, it's your most audacious book ever. Both in scope, the scope of the narrative, and what you tried to do, and the way you wanted to carry everybody along, the multiple characters, and everything about the book. I need not talk about, the brilliance of the writing. I'm a sucker for language. So when I began to read it, it was the first thing that struck me. I said, wow, she's back. But I wonder, when I read the book, it's the story of 4 women, and we see them at various stages of their development. And there is a ring of irony that encircles the 4 women, in the sense that even at the height of their power, there was some level of emptiness, and it made me feel sad. So what really is the issue? It seems to me, to point at, a longing, and the pursuit of fulfillment. And at the end of the day, they didn't come off as, fulfilled. So are you trying to pass a commentary on life and these many, many unfulfilled aspirations and dreams?
No. I quarrel with your reading. I quarrel with the analysis. You're wrong. That it's not. So, onye go dream count go on your for mobile si ago. No, what if I So, okay, you know what? I'm joking. I mean, I think it's a fair interpretation, but it's not one that I agree with. I think it's also a question of I think we all long, there's a longing, I think, at the heart of life. I think life, in the end, is a certain longing. We long for joy, we long for meaning, we long for love. And the characters are all different. I wouldn't agree that there's an emptiness there. I think maybe what we can talk about is how differently we can define fulfillment, right? But I think also that maybe something at play is a certain Nigerian approach to life. We Nigerians were very pragmatic. And that pragmatism can sometimes bleed into something close to hard-heartedness, something close to an impatience with the softer things. So I've noticed that for my Nigerian readers, the character of Chia, who is a very dreamy person, she's almost everybody who's spoken to me about her in Nigeria. One person said to me, "Is she okay? Is she all right?" And then many of them have said, what type of, Ebuka Obiuchendu on stage in Lagos called Chia, very silly girl. But on the other hand, my American readers, oh my God, she's such a dreamer. And they say this with approval. So I sense that what might be at play is a certain Nigerian worldview, and also in some ways, a longing for a Nigerian need for clarity. Yes. And sometimes literature doesn't provide clarity. So I would say that my characters, at least most of them, find a certain kind. Zikora does not. I would agree with that. But I think the others, I've actually felt that this is my happiest ending of all of my work. You know, half of a yellow song, we all know how it ended. Ehe. Kita fa babalo mumba. Sim kedebe kainene no. Oya jukwana mo. Oya jukwana maka kainene amaro mebo no. But you know, I felt that this was an ending that had some hope.
Well, okay. Let's leave that there. I was struck by the sheer attention to detail in sculpting the character of Kadiatu. You know, and what seemed to be a very intense research into Guinea, the Guinean way of life, the things, you know, you led me into a new world. I didn't know anything about Guinea. You know, you went, even their political history, everything was reflected. You know, you brought that to bear on the character of Kadiatu. You endeared her to me. Okay, yeah, you succeeded. It was a brilliant one. But it leaves me wondering, you know, especially considering that character is modeled, Kadiatu is modeled after a real life character, you know. Did you find it easy to create Kadiatu?
No, Kadiatu was the most difficult character to write. Kadiatu's section was the section that in which I did the most rewriting and editing. Because for the reasons that you've said, I'm writing about a character who's not Nigerian. And you know, when you're writing what you know, there's a kind of unconscious authority you bring to your storytelling. If I'm writing a Nigerian character, I don't really question there's a certain authority I bring to the storytelling because I know I know this country. I get it. At least I know Southern Nigeria. I don't know Northern Nigeria as well. And so I bring an authority to the storytelling. I don't question myself. But I was writing about a country I knew little about, Guinea. And so I did a lot of research. And sometimes the problem with research when you're writing fiction is you have to be careful not to let the research overwhelm the fiction. And this was also something I had to keep in mind for Half of a Yellow Sun. Because I read so much, I had so many notes, I looked at so many archives that you're tempted to show off how much you have learned of. And then it no longer becomes centered on the character. So with Kadiatu, I think the first draft was just full of all my research. I read political books. I also read some novels because it's important to kind of get the texture. And I talked to many people from Guinea. And so I rewrote her quite a few times. And also because this character is based on a real person. I mean, loosely, of course. I mean, I invented her history. I felt a sense of responsibility. You know, I felt that there are people, so the real person on whom this character is based, her name is Nafisatu Jallo, and she's a Guinean woman who lives in the US, and she worked in New York as a hotel maid. And in 2011, she accused Dominique Strauss-Kahn of sexual assault. And at the time, Dominique Strauss-Kahn was the head of the International Monetary Fund, and he was also believed to be the next president of France. So he was a very important man, and she was a lowly hotel maid, and he assaulted her sexually. And, you know, and the coverage that followed, which I followed very closely, was really, really important to me on a number of levels. I really admired America, that a big man was being held to account. But of course, her case was very quickly dropped, and it was dropped because the prosecutors said that she had lied on her asylum application many years before, which infuriated me and wounded my spirit. But not just because of Nafisatu Jallo, because of women in general, because I felt that the message that was being sent to women is that if you want to get justice after you've been sexually assaulted, then you better be an angel. You better be a saint. You better not have told one single lie in your life. And I don't know anybody here who has never told one lie. Please don't lie by saying that you've never told one lie. Please So what we're being told then is you cannot get justice. You accuse somebody of a crime and suddenly it becomes about you instead of the person you've accused. But anyway, I wrote about it at the time, to say about it. And I think I carried this woman's story in my heart because of what it meant to so many other women. So when I started Dream Count, this character came to me. I wanted to humanize her. I hope that readers will go away remembering that a woman you read about in situations of this sort is still a human being. No, she's a human being, and it's important to remember that. But I didn't want her to be a saint. I think it wasn't that we remember that nobody's perfect. We're all flawed. So I wanted to strike that balance between a flawed human being who also happens to be remarkable in her quiet wisdom, her quiet strength, her common sense. Yes, unlike Chia. Yes, unlike Chia, who's sort of dreaming through life. And Kajatu is just like, what sort of nonsense is this? Yes, very grounded. Yes. So that's why she was difficult to write. I haven't met Nafisatu Jello. No, I don't know her. Everything was based on public information about her. But I think I might reach out to her now that I've written the novel.
It's important. One more question. And then probably at the stage we'll take one or two questions from the audience if they are interested. Otherwise we would fire on. Now, reading Dream Count, I noticed that I think there was something like a deliberate attempt to represent, the complexity that is Nigeria. Almost every tribe has a character representing them, even in your books, in your previous works, we didn't get to read, characters from the northern part of the country. But, there was this woman in Dream Count, a liberated Hausa Fulani woman that imposed herself on the narrative so formidably that you couldn't ignore her character after reading Dream Count. So why was that a deliberate attempt to give everybody a sense of belonging? I just want to know.
I'm happy. I really like how you describe the character of Hawa. Imposes herself formidably. Yes, that's, I like that one. I will not quarrel with. I don't know. Was it deliberate? I suppose yes. I think all the choices I made in some ways are deliberate, but I think it just reflects my interest. Of course, I think it's fairly obvious here. My sense of identity as an Igbo woman is very strong. It is central to who I am. But at the same time, I also have a very Pan-African, sense of, I call myself an emotional Pan-African. I feel very strongly about not just Africa, but all the peoples of African descent. I care about their fate. And Nigeria is important to me. Nigeria is a country with so many problems. And I often half joke, I didn't ask to be Nigerian, but this is what they gave me. So I wanted to do well. I want Nigeria to succeed. I want us to have a better sense of unity in our diversity. I want us to know one another better. And I'm just genuinely curious about different Nigerian cultures. And so if you notice in the book, there are many characters, and they're all small side characters, but the characters from very small ethnic groups. I'm very fascinated by the untold stories of the smaller ethnic groups in this country. I find it very interesting. Growing up, we thought the North was a monolith. Everybody was. But you start to learn about the individual ethnic groups, their stories, their triumphs. And I personally find it very moving. So that was part of my way of, I suppose, just a very subtle celebration of the possibility of unity. And I should say as well that there are characters who have names from Northern Cross River, particularly from a wonderful town called Itigidi.
I won't say one. And the amazing medical doctor who showed up.
Yes. So there is in Dream Count a wonderful character. That character is the best gynecologist at the University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital. That character is loved by all his patients. And that character is based on a true person, a man who I'm so proud to call my father-in-law, Dr. Nkanu Sege. Was a very careful reader.
I enjoy your reading, I enjoy whatever you have written, and, I wouldn't let you go without asking you this question, because you also have confessed elsewhere that when you're not writing, you find yourself reading poetry. And, when I read your works, I see a lot of poetry in what you write, and the other day I did a workshop at the festival in our reimagined Umofia, where I looked at, the poetry of Things Fall Apart, because I began to actually see, what you guys, in fact, I've discovered your secret to make I tell you now.
Okay. What is the secret?
You people you and Achebe, you put so much poetry in your writing that, the brilliance leaves people coming back. You read and you want to come back and read again. So please, what place does poetry have in your writing? Does it have a place at all?
Yeah.
Does it in any way creep into you, maybe unconsciously, even when you write?
I hope so. But I think what I would say is that the role of poetry in my writing is the role of teacher. Poetry teaches me. Poetry reminds me of the magic of language. And I think that Dream Count is finally the book in which I let loose. I didn't hold back. I think I let my love of language show. And that love of language comes from poetry. When I'm writing fiction, I don't like to read fiction because I'm worried about sounding like the writer I'm reading. So instead I read poetry, a lot of poetry when I'm writing fiction. And in general, I prefer to read anthologies just so that there are different voices in my head rather than reading singular collections when I'm writing fiction. And as a reader, I find that I appreciate a fiction writer who pays attention to language. And it's so interesting what you say about Things Fall Apart, the poetry of it, because I reread Things Fall Apart because of this festival. And I hadn't read it in a number of years. And reading it with new eyes, you see new things. There's this red in tooth and claw is a line. Do you remember that line? I think it's when Achebe is describing
that claw, right?
No, claw.
Okay. Yes.
Should we check?
No, you're right. You're right. I remember that line.
I was struck by that. Yeah. But also the music of his sentences. And there's a sentence that will always move me to just great emotion in Things Fall Apart. And it's about Kunkwo's father. When they carried him away, he took with him his flute. That sentence is so beautiful in its simplicity and its power.
That's why, when you see sculpted sentences like that, I read them as poetry because they are stripped to bare bones and they glitter in the dark. So sometimes and I've noticed it, there was even a portion of Dream Counts, like almost 2 passages that were, to my mind, absolute gorgeous poetry. Maybe some other time I'll show you.
Okay.
Because...
But whatever section it is, I agree with you.
Now, how well is Dream Count doing in terms of numbers since March? This is the final question, anyway.
No, honestly, but I have to say that what I feel most about Dream Count is gratitude. I feel so grateful every day since Dream Count came out.
Okay.
I'm grateful that I finished the book.
Yeah.
I'm grateful. I wasn't sure. I haven't written a novel in 10 years. So I felt that I was going into new territory. Publishing has changed in that time. So I wasn't sure how Dream Count would be received, but Dream Count was an instant bestseller in the UK, in the US, in France, in Germany, and in Nigeria. Where is Dr. Maswe? Dr. Maswe we should ask Dr. Maswe, my publisher. But of course, we know that many people have stories of, I've been looking for Dream Count, I've not found it, such as you. So it's done, it's doing very well. It's finding its readers, and I am so grateful, honestly, because, you never know. Yeah.
Well, it is on this note that I think we should all give Odeluwa a standing ovation. Thank you, everybody. Let's do this. Yeah. Yeah. Odeluwa, I'll leave you to my very good friend.